With notes, the devil's in the details, right? You don't want to get bogged down in the details, but you do need to pay attention to them or you could get bit. You don't want to miss something in due diligence, or let's say you buy a handful of notes, you can kind of keep it in your head. You do leverage your vendors quite a bit. In theory, you could just outsource all the work to a bunch of vendors and it would be super simple. In reality, you've got to keep up with them on a day-to-day basis, and then you need systems to help you manage it. But other things, there's a relatively small number of people and a really large market to address. That's what really got me interested into it. And you got to understand, some of the title work and due diligence. It keeps a lot of people out, right? It's not that it's hard, but there's just enough of a barrier. It kind of keeps it small.
You are listening to the number one real estate podcast in the world. We talk with the real estate professionals all across North America about their wins, losses, lessons, and stories help you win in your local market today. My name is Cody from Sheridan Stream, joined with Vikram, Deol, the Real Estate Sales Academy. Vic told me about 15 minutes prior to that he was going to pop by my place in Medellin, and we were a little concerned at first. And the reason we were a little concerned is because he walked in, he rang the doorbell. He's like, bro, you see what's going on across the street right now? And I'm like, no, I have no idea what's going on. So we took a look outside and we saw that there was a tree hanging on the power lines. And the tree hanging on the power lines made it very interesting for me to figure out whether or not we were going to have power during this podcast, or whether
they're still cutting the tree.
And they're still there. We might cut out halfway through. So Dan, if we do, that is why. And if the listeners we cut out during this podcast, that is why. But Vic, man, what's happening? We got a guest today, but before we intro our guest, what's good in your world? We have why don't we drop the news right now about what's happening on August the 1st?
I was gonna drop the news. What's good in our new? Okay, so what's good in the Real Estate Sales Academy is clients like Jan and Molly and Edwin and Eduardo and just so many people that we're talking to, because we started actually we do a weekly tracker, but it's more for them to track and know that there's some accountability, that there's we can look at the numbers and we can dive into it. So I get more granular and I look at the numbers and I dive into them and I'm like, okay, you're getting a lot of calls in, you're having a lot of conversations, you're not booking good appointments. So what we need to work on in the next week is your openers or your tonality, or you're getting a lot of conversations. Just for the sake of our world, we define a conversation as anything over 2 minutes. So you're getting a lot of conversations, but you're not booking a lot of appointments. So you're either not getting the overarching goal or you're not asking the game plan frame. But those guys that I just met, well, there's so many of them now because we're giving them new trackers that we developed, and the dashboard's sick, and they're double, triple, 80%, 60%, 40%, 20, 9 new listings coming up.
Well, Jan told me recently that he's done just as many listings in the 3-month period that he did all of last year. And, he relates that a lot back to our training. So it's pretty cool.
They actually are. He's actually now got more listings pending close and coming soon. Because the last 2 weeks he's brought on 3 or 4 more. So he's actually beating what he did last year now. And he'll probably close by the end of July, total volume more than what he did, double. He'll be almost double what he did in end of July, crazy. End of August, and he'll still have 4 more months left. So it's pretty cool. But why don't you share what's happening on August 1st?
I'll share. I have no problem sharing what's happening on August 1st. Yeah. With all these wins that are happening, in the Sales Academy, inside of Sheridan, clients, Vic and I have made the decision that we are going to run a 1-day sales summit in Las Vegas, August the 1st at the Aria Resort and Casino. If you're a real estate agent and you're looking to take your business to the next level this year, 1-day event. It's going to be an amazing 1-day event where we're going to train agents specifically on how to attract the right traffic, how to get high quality leads, how to implement the right system so you nurture your leads for life, and then how to actually gain the skills necessary in order to have the conversations to make the income and lifestyle that you're looking for. So super excited about that. We're going to be dropping the link later on this week. First come, first serve. We're going to sell this place out. Only 100 tickets are going to be available. Also, we confirmed yesterday that Sharon Srivatsa is going to be speaking. The president of Real Brokers, fastest publicly traded company in all the world right now. He's going to be coming in, speaking, going to be sharing with our clients. Our clients have first come, first serve. So if you're a client, you're listening to this podcast, do yourself a favor. We're going to send the link to you first. Do yourself a favor, get your tickets, because there's only going to be 100, and we're running it in line with Inman. So there's going to be people from Inman that are going to want to join this conference as well. So if you're a client, you're listening to this podcast right now, do yourself a favor. This podcast is going to probably come out. The link is already there. Do yourself a favor and get yourself a freaking ticket, because these tickets are going to sell out. Live with Sharon, live with me, live with Vic. Very first sales event hosted by Sheridan Street. So pretty excited about that. But
let's bring on our guest.
Let's intro our guest, because he's doing some really cool things. So Dan, why don't you give us the 60-second Cliff Notes version on who you are, how you got into the space, and then we kind of hop right into it and try to provide a massive amount of value back to the agents we serve across North America.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks for having me on. So my name is Dan Deppen, and I'm a mortgage note investor. So I'm located in Colorado, but one of the nice things about notes is you can invest from a distance. I buy notes across the country, actually none in my home state. So it's kind of a niche area of real estate investing a lot of people aren't that familiar with. But what you can do is basically function as a bank. So you can go out as an investor, buy these mortgages, and then collect payments. Or if the borrower is not making payments, then you can work with my team of attorneys, take it through the foreclosure process, at which point you've got an REO to sell. And that's when I end up working with agents to sell REOs after I've taken properties through the foreclosure process.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting that a niche for sure in the space. Well, real quick, like how did you even get into it? And then let's jump into how this could benefit agents.
Yeah, so I found it about 8 years ago when I was wanting to diversify out of investing in stocks into real estate. And even back then in the Denver area where I am, cap rates were pretty tough. So I started looking for other alternatives. And I had family that grew up with that were in the loan business, not this specifically, but I kind of enjoyed the analytical aspect of them. And I like these areas that are lucrative niches where you're not competing with like everybody and their brother chasing the same deal.
And how does one go about, and I know this is a huge topic because I actually went to a seminar on notes a long time ago, but how would an agent that wants to possibly create a relationship with an investor like you, because you do, depending on how big you are, you do take foreclosures, hopefully not too many, but it is what it is. How would an agent get a hold of you if, to even see if you guys would be a fit to help you with the listbacks? Because that's what they're essentially going to do. They're going to list your REO foreclosures or your REOs because you're essentially the bank.
Exactly. And so, I mean, fortunately, there aren't a whole ton of individuals like me that do this. So we're like fairly easy to find. So there are a number of note investing related Facebook groups. One of the best ways to do it is there's a couple of conferences, like there's the Note Expo conference in Dallas in November. If you show up there, you'll meet a slew of people who are doing this. So that's kind of the advantage of being in the small world, is the people that do it are fairly easy to find.
Yeah. So you mentioned you were in the stock investing space and you kind of like repositioned yourself into this space. Like, walk me through the journey of that. Like, say for example, like, could an agent invest in, become an investor as well? Like, is this something that like?
A lot of them do. Yeah. So for example, like one of the guys that's an agent in Florida, he did about 6 joint ventures with me to kind of learn the business.
Got it.
And then he went off and did his own. Now he had a lot of other investing process, but agents are, fairly well positioned to do notes because they already understand the real estate piece of it. And they just have to add a few other things. When I came into it, it was a little more challenging because I came into it without a real estate background at all. So I had more to learn, but it's nice for agents because it can give them some additional tools in their toolkit. And so when I do end up with foreclosures that I need to sell, or REOs, what I'm looking for are, there are a number of agents who specialize in selling REOs because it's a little bit of a different business, right? And not
everyone. A lot of paperwork.
A lot of paperwork, yeah. And then like some of the agents work with, except I got a great one in Cincinnati. A lot of them have relationships with local contractors, property preservation companies. And so what they'll actually do is organize a lot of the other work that I need to do. And then obviously they take a cut of that, right? So there are other avenues for them to make money on the deal as well.
So if an agent wants to get into this, what should they expect in regards to like, because I'm completely blind to this stuff, like the note investing. What can they expect in regards to like average commissions, like that they would essentially make, kind of holding a note? Like how do they get paid? Like how does that process work?
Well, they get paid the same way that they normally do,
okay.
Right? So they'll make whatever their percentage is. Now, some of mine, like a lot of mine are sub $100,000 properties in the Midwest, and then some of them are kind of like beat down. So a lot of times I end up doing like fixed fees with the agents, because if you do it on the percentage basis, it's not really going to be worth their while to do it. Yeah. So there's the normal commission plus, if they have a vendor network, they can leverage, then they can basically also make a commission off of, the clean out, like other kinds of work that gets done on the property.
Got it.
It's an interesting space. A lot of agents want to invest, but real estate's hard to invest in, right? There's a lot of competition. There's dealing with people, there's dealing with tenants. So if you buy a note, right, can you buy an individual note, or do you have to buy a block?
No, you can buy an individual note. And actually the majority of notes that I own are performing, right? So notes become a nice substitute for, say, rental cash flow, because you're not dealing directly with the tenant and some of those other things. Now, you don't necessarily have some of the tax benefits that real estate have. It's maybe a little bit more technical. Like you have to understand how to do your due diligence on notes. I'm not saying it's super complicated, but there's a few extra nuances. But it can be a more scalable way to invest money and generate cash flows. And what's nice is you don't have to do it in your backyard. You can do it across the country relatively easily.
So when you got into this space, like, 'cause this is a super niche, we hear real estate investing, and like, I think we've talked to people that invest in Section 8, like we've talked with different people that kind of choose like kind of their lane. Why did you make the decision to choose this as your lane? And then like walk us through kind of like what you've been able to accomplish in the space when it comes to like, 'cause like you mentioned like chatting about team, like you have a team, like what does that kind of look like? Kind of share with our audience a little bit about what that looks like for you.
Yeah, I mean, I like this space because the supply and demand equation is in the investor's favor, right? So if you just look at the seller finance side of notes, there were, I think, 249,000 created just last year, plus the ones that were created in previous years, plus the institutional paper. And I've been trying to figure out how many people do this. I think it's less than 10,000, right? So unlike people trying to do fix and flips and other things, there's a relatively small number of people and a really large market to address. That's what really got me interested into it. And because it's got a few extra nuances, you got to understand, some of the title work and due diligence. It keeps a lot of people out, right? It's not that it's hard, but there's just enough of a barrier. It kind of keeps it small. So that's why I like it. It's also relatively easy to get outside funding for your deals. So what I do is a lot of, I'm not going to rabbit hole on this, but I do a lot of hypothecations on my loans, right? So like I'll buy a performing loan at a 13-14% yield, and I'll take a loan from an investor using their self-directed IRA at say like 9%, right? And so I create a cash flow spread, and then I also retain the upside because I'm buying the loan at a discount if I get an early payoff. And so the way it looks now is I've got right around 60 notes all together, spread across the country. I'm going to scale it up to maybe 70, 75 this year. I'm not trying to get it super huge. And then I've got one employee that helps me half time. And then I've got a few other contractors that I employ from time to time to handle a lot of the day-to-day. You do leverage your vendors quite a bit. So I use licensed loan servicers to collect payments from the borrowers and do a lot of the follow-up. But then you also got to keep track of them. In theory, you could just outsource all the work to a bunch of vendors and it would be super simple. In reality, you've got to keep up with them. So that's a lot of what Karen, who helps me out, does on a day-to-day basis. And then I started my career as an engineer in the aerospace industry. So like I'm a big systems and processes guy. So I've got a bunch of things that I do.
So you're
monthly.
exactly like most realtors, Dan.
I know. Yeah.
You love systems and processes and technology and sitting in front of a spreadsheet and tracking all that. Like you're just like most realtors are. Like just like the average salesperson.
Precisely. Yeah. Yeah. And I'd say I'm a little bit unique in the business, right? Is that there's the people who do the, kind of fire ready aim that are like good salespeople. And then there's people who are good at analytics. But the problem that they tend to run into is they get into this whole paralysis analysis thing, right? Yeah. Like if you can do the right amount of analysis and have like the right amount of systems and do it quickly, that can be really powerful. Yeah, most people get stuck on one end of the barbell or the other.
Kind of like real estate investing. They it's like, oh, this deal could be good, but it could be bad, and or it's like, well, who's going to manage all the back end? And it's kind of the same. It's kind of the same bubble.
And with notes, the devil's in the details, right? And so you don't want to get bogged down in the details, but you do need to pay attention to them, or you could get bit. You don't want to miss something in due diligence, or, once you start going over, if you got like, let's say you buy a handful of notes, you can kind of keep it in your head. That's pretty easy. You start going above 10 and then you get like to 20 and, 50 and beyond. You need systems to help you manage it. Cause otherwise, and I've done this myself, especially early on where like it was time to start foreclosure and and the attorney didn't just do what they're supposed to automatically, and I missed it, right? So it's just a lot of like following up with people to keep things moving.
73% of agents say they don't feel confident with their actual listing presentation. And almost 90% of agents we talk to say that they don't feel comfortable talking to people they don't know on the phone, which means we have a huge gap, and we help you solve that inside of the Real Estate Sales Academy. And if you want more information about our online community where we teach you exactly what to say around your schedule, or if you're ready to take your business and double or triple or quadruple it, click the link below and myself or my team will reach out about a free sales strategy audit so we can see if there's any hidden gaps in your business causing you to lose deals to the top agent that you should be winning. Now let's get back to the podcast.
What do you like, you get $100,000 note, let's call it, right? So you're getting a Midwest home, or maybe it's a small note on a home somewhere else. What do you expect to cash flow on a monthly basis per 100K on average? Or does it?
Yeah. So I would say 100K on average. Like miles varies based on the interest rate of the underlying loan and the discount you get it at and the overall riskiness. But typically that $100,000 note, it's probably going to pay, $1,000 to $1,200 a month. Like assuming you just bought the note outright with cash. Now, if you're gonna, if you buy it right and you've got you got a passive investor that you can hypothecate with, then you can probably create, mileage varies, but maybe like around like $300-$400 a month spread on that, and then you're also retaining upside that you have, right? It's like, so let's say you paid $100,000 for the note, but you got it at a discount. So there's actually $120,000 balance, right? If the borrower refinances or pays off early, then you can make this nice gain at the same time. So for me, the name of the game is to create little bits of cash flow. None of these are like massively cash flowing, but if you do enough, it adds up. And then you get these periodic early payoffs that are kind of nice. So net, it turns into a nice model. The trick is, if you're going to do it, as a job, if you're going to do it as a main thing, then you want to go out and do a bunch of them, right? If you do one, it's going to be kind of hit or miss.
So where does your podcast play into all of this? Like, why did you start the pod? Because looking into as you were kind of coming on, you have legendary podcast. Like, where does that play into this? Is the Fusion Note is that a side gig? Is that a full gig? Like what?
Yeah. So with the podcast, so it's called the Note Investor Podcast. And it's just all about note investing. So for one, I got into podcasting like when it started, I think in like 05 or 06. So I always enjoy listening to it. So it's fun to have one. And it does a lot for me. One, I get to talk to really interesting people that I want to pick their brains on things. It's good for me. Some of them are just me jabbering, and it's good to flush out my thoughts. I do find a lot of outside investors that way, because like a lot of times people listen to it and they're like, hey, I'm interested in learning more about this. And then I also have some note investing training courses and coaching and things, that I offer. So it's a good funnel for that. So it kind of does a whole bunch of different things, and it's a lot of fun. And I probably learn more from it than anybody else who listens to it.
Yeah, we've got, what number is this for us? Like 240, 250 in the last 18, 19 months. So we went pretty hard in the paint at first. And I think now we're down from, we're doing 5 or 6 a week down to like 4 to 3. And now we're at 1 to 2.
Yeah, 1 to 2 a week.
And we've met some really cool people like that are out there in the world. What is one of the things? So you work with some agents, it sounds like. Obviously you probably know a lot of agents that are in the world of what you're just by hapstance of being in this world. What are some of the things that are working for your agents? Like, how are they finding deals right now for themselves? Because, maybe how would you, in your experience, if you were talking to agents that were looking for deal flow, or looking for sales skills, right? Looking for systems and processes, take us down a little bit of what you would recommend for an agent, because they're all entrepreneurs and business owners. They forget that they are. What would be like a couple of recommendations that you might have?
I think one big avenue that is just not exploited is working with sellers who are willing to do seller finance, right?
So how do they find them?
Yeah. So, I mean, part of it is just networking with real estate investors and people who are note investors specifically, because there aren't that many agents who will specialize in REOs and really understand seller finance. It creates a lot of confusion. Like for me, I've got a number of go-to agents that understand that stuff, so that when I get an REO, I call them directly. There are also a handful of people who keep directories, like Dickie Baldwin at Baldwin Advisory Group is one. He's been steadily building this network of investor-friendly agents, so that when someone like needs help with an REO, like you can go to Dickie and he'll send out those referrals, right? So if you're on Dickie's list and you're in a particular city, like the phone will just tend to ring. And what I think a lot of people kind of underappreciate is if you've got a seller who wants to create another note and is willing to do seller finance, it really opens up the aperture on the number of buyers who go to that property, right? So it's not just limited to buyers who have cash or can get bank financing, right? So it makes it easier, potentially faster, to get the property sold. And what's cool is like people that do notes, they tend to do a lot of them. So once you get those relationships, there tends to eventually be repeat business in there as well. They're not just one-offs.
That's gold. Like, and I think there's power in that. Like, like you mentioned a few things. It's like, knowing the names of the people in the space, like you mentioned Dickie Baldwin, but even getting around like networking events, like, we believe in that very, very firmly. Dan, man, this was a ton of fun. And thank you for sharing so openly and so freely. We got to wrap up here, but if somebody were to want to reach out to you, maybe it's an agent and they want to learn a little bit more about what you do, or maybe it's somebody listening to the podcast that, wants to learn a little bit more about note investing, where's the best place that we can send them for them to have a conversation with you?
Yeah, best place to go is fusionnotes.com/listeners. I've kind of aggregated all the links there. So depending on whether you're wanting to learn about notes or you want to book a call just to chat with me or whatever, I've got everything right there. So it's just fusionnotes.com/listeners.
Dan, I want to say thank you. And I want to say thank you for tuning into another episode of the Our Agent Podcast. If you got any value out of today, getting any value out of these episodes, all we ask is that you go over to iTunes, leave us a nice little review, subscribe to us on YouTube. We'll see you in the next episode.